Hi there, folks! Old-fashioned gamer's the name, and gaming's my game. Man, was it cool when we got Sonic Mania after many years of less promising titles. It is by far my favorite 2D Sonic game, and probably one of my favorite 2D games, period. It is still a blast to play after all these years have passed. So, I decided to go back and play. But instead of the usual modes, we're going to try and see if we can beat it without touching any springs, which includes the ones that you can both jump off of and boost dash from. I have no idea how this is going to go, so let's find out. Starting with Act 1 of Green Hill Zone, I felt like I had to get used to not moving around as fast simply because you just never know where these suckers might be. If I hit one spring, I would have to restart the level, which fortunately Sonic Mania makes pretty easy. Overall, despite a little trial and error, I beat Act 1. Right when Act 2 starts is where we run into a big problem. See, we're supposed to break through this barrier by using the spring provided at the very bottom, but obviously we're not allowed to do that. So I opted to have Tails fly Sonic up to see if that would break through it, but no luck was found. I also tried building speed and dashed up, but I couldn't get high enough to pull this off. So, does this mean the challenge failed? Are we screwed right from the start of the game? Nope. Fortunately, one of Sonic Mania's built-in features is the ability to switch off between characters. So instead of Sonic and Tails, I switched to just Tails and went back to Act 2 Green Hill. My idea was to use his flying ability to see if that would possibly break through the barrier, and by some miracle, it actually does. I was a little worried at first though, since while he did break through it, it just didn't get high enough to where he could break the last part. So I just made sure I got a little extra speed and jumped at the perfect time so that he could just barely make it up there. The rest of the stage did have a couple of small things to traverse, but nothing beyond that. Also, unrelated, but I discovered this giant ring here that I had never found in this particular level before. So, that's kinda neat. And this next boss fight is literally a joke. Just stand to the very left underneath him and you'll win no problem. Even when you're touching his legs, you still take no damage. After finishing that off, I switched back to both Sonic and Tails to proceed on to the next zone. In Chemical Plant Zone, among others, we have to avoid touching these dash panels before they send us going down in the opposite direction side by side. So I found that by getting directly in front of them and then going to the opposite direction was my best bet. The level also has these bounce pads after coming out of a pipe, which does send us up if we don't immediately turn, but as long as you do, they're easy to avoid. There's also the booster dash panel that sends us flying, but as long as we jump over it thanks to this gap we have from the ceiling, we can beat Act 1 with minimal issues. But then in Act 2, we once again run into another hurdle right at the start. There's this booster dash panel we need to jump over, which I know we were able to do in Act 1 as we had room to do it, but the problem with this, however, is that the ceiling is too low for me to pull this off. So that means it's time to bust Tails back out, whom we can use to just barely avoid the booster. So after using that and the strategies used in the first act, I got a Chaos Emerald and played some Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine before hitting the big time. In Studiopolis Zone Act 1, I had to restart this level more times than I can count. This is actually one of those levels where you feel even more incentivized to go fast and also have less field of view to see where the springs are coming. On my last attempt, Tails was unbeknownst right next to a boost, which he could have easily gotten to at any time. Man, that was sheer luck. In Act 2, we again ran into another issue. Once we get to this part, there's all these balloons lined going up. On the very top, there's a spring underneath which sends us up to the spiral above. So I went back with Solo Tails, and I thought that maybe if I tried to circle around in a certain way, I could maybe bypass the gap and go to the left. With that said, it was a lot easier said than done, and I was starting to have my doubts. I must have tried this with him for like an hour or so and wasn't making any progress. But after an hour of attempts and being this close to giving up, this happened. And there you have it. With a little bit of trial and error, nearly anything is possible. Nearly. And the rest of the stage was okie dokie. Now what's interesting about the airship levels are these fire boost pads that if you stand on them, they'll briefly shoot you up in the air. Not thinking ahead to the beginning of this challenge, I realized I needed to do my best to avoid those as well. Otherwise, Act 1 didn't give me too much trouble. I just had to be careful as usual. Act 2, on the other hand, was complete trash. Right away, we're expected to use this pad to jump up and get past the open-close barrier. I tried flying myself up there with barely enough strength for Tails to withstand, but I just could not break through. Then I tried using Knuckles, but still, I could not break through no matter what I did. So unfortunately, it is not possible to beat Sonic Mania without touching any springs. Oh well, might as well go through the rest of the game. Press Garden Act 1 I have nothing to say about. Just watch your step and bada bing bada boom. You want proof I didn't hit any springs? Done. In Act 2, there's these springs that exist which we can bounce off of but go away after doing it once. Since I messed this one up, I went solo Tails again, and despite the ability to fly making it easier to dodge, a lot of walls and area are really tight and I must have spent a good couple of hours on this. Even when pulling up a map online, I took multiple routes and it would be one thing after another preventing me from moving forward. I hate wasting so much time on just one level, and since we already determined the challenge is impossible, we're just gonna move on. Yeah, it's that frustrating. Stardust Speedway Act 1 wasn't much of a break at all, because there were these springs everywhere at one part where you go back and forth, as well as these ones attached to these metal things which shoot you in all sorts of directions. Every path I took, I just could not avoid them for the life of me. So, I'm afraid we're just gonna have to move on from this. Now, I tried Act 2 for over an hour and could not for the life of me figure out how to beat this. No matter which path I took, it seemed as though there would always be springs everywhere, making this more difficult than the first act. Now, if there is a way to beat this, someone please let me know, because I am not gonna waste any more time on this stupid course. Although I do want to say that when you get to the Metal Sonic boss, he's literally a joke once he gets into the giant form. Just jump on his spot and fly away and everything is a piece of cake. With Tails, that is. And such a nice way to end such a stressful level. Act 1 of Hydro City has those switches you jump on to float up with a bubble. Now I know for these you don't necessarily get a boost jump or speed dash from, but for the sake of this video, I'll try avoiding these as well. And it all went fine until I came to this part sending you straight down to a bubble spring. Wow, didn't see that coming. On Act 2, when you first start going up, you have to either keep jumping or fly, because otherwise you're gonna get sent up with a spring underneath. Otherwise, this was a breeze. Pun fully intended. Mirage Saloon Act 1 was by far our easiest yet, as I'm sure you can guess why. I'm in the air for the first part of the level, and even when I get to the train section, there's literally only one spring to avoid, and it's hardly even a threat. Although unrelated, I did want to mention that I got launched into the air, and instead of triggering the caterpillar boss, I ended up seeing 2 rotating birds which I destroyed, but then nothing happened. There's just a plain old desert with no obstacles or enemies, and I'm not sure what went wrong. I'm guessing somehow the way we did the train section triggered something else to come up instead of the caterpillar boss, and then somehow got us in an infinite loop? I don't know. But look, you guys, I know what an infinite loop is because I went to college and have a certificate in web development. But anyways, I'm getting off track. Another pun fully intended. Now in Act 2, there's those spring beaks which knock you to the side, but by using tails to fly over or just using these star decorations to our advantage, we can beat this level. After taking my final bow on stage, I shot myself off to Oil Ocean Zone. Nothing much to say about Act 1. The springs didn't seem to get in the way that much. In Act 2, there are those green springs you're supposed to push in to get a boost, but by building speed to the side or using tails to fly, they are absolutely no problem. Lava Reef Act 1 wasn't really that tough. There were only maybe a couple of spots I had to pay attention to. In Act 2, again, go slow and watch your step and you're good to go. And I even got the motorcycle boss on my first try. And wait, are we in the Star Wars universe? Moving on, just like Stardust Speedway Act 2, Act 1 is another one of those stages I spent over an hour on and instantly made me regret this entire challenge. Not only are the springs easy to hit, but there's also this gimmick in the level where you hop on these bell things and it sends you into the background layout of the level. So I just gave up on this one. Luckily, Act 2 wasn't quite as unbearable. Still tricky, don't get me wrong, but many springs aren't laid out in such ridiculous ways. Now, on to the final zone. Well, as long as you jump at the last second before you hit this ugly thing, you'll be just fine. You thought we were done there? Nope. Next, we have to get past this part with the purple flying orbs right next to these wall springs. I found that by very carefully going up from the orb without falling back in or down to the bottom, I could barely fly my way up above the next circle orb. Then we just use the same process and go straight up. I could have honestly done a whole video with just this act alone, but yes, it is possible. Now for the grand finale. At the beginning, we need to jump off this ride at just the right time before we hit a spring either forward or on the ground. The main gimmick for the level are the multiple paths we have to take. But no matter which one I took, I always seem to run into these stupid springs. You know what, at this point I can't take it anymore, so let's just end it here. So there you have it. Out of 24 acts, only 6 were not possible. I'm honestly surprised 18 levels even were possible. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and as usual, stay safe, stay strong, stay silly. This is Old Fashioned Gamer, signing off.